Good evening, everybody. This is Brendan Magnan, Chair of the Inland Wetlands Commission, calling to order the July 5th public hearing and regular meeting of the Inland Wetlands Agency. Lisa, please call the roll. Please note that Steve Munson is going to be absent this evening.
Ranjit Bahav.
Here.
Daniel Bedecker.
Yeah.
Jim Connors. Matthew Connors. Dave DeFlameri. Heather Donaldson Gladue. Lisa Tryon.
Here.
Julie Valvo.
Here.
Brendan Magnan.
And I'm here. Thank you, Lisa. We do have a quorum. At this time, before we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, just want to remind everyone that's attending that this meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the City of Milford website. It is being live streamed via YouTube as well. And in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act and Governor Lamont's orders, executive orders, as I said, it will be posted on the website, the City of Milford website. Just as a matter of protocol, we have a large attendee roster here. If for any reason during the meeting you would like to be acknowledged, please use the raise your hand feature via Zoom so that you can be recognized by me. When you are recognized, please state your name and address for the record prior to making any comments. And please only speak towards the jurisdiction of the Inland Wetlands Agency. At this time, I'd like to invite everyone to unmute themselves and stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance on this July 5th.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody, for unmuting yourselves. And now if you can mute yourselves again. Just let me take the time to set the rules for this evening's public hearing. This is a public hearing for 0305 and 325 Subway. Thank you very much for your continued interest in the process. Please note that we do have a process. Everyone is encouraged to speak either for, against, or neither for or against. And we will invite the public to present after the applicant presents new information, and we would encourage anyone that is interested in speaking to only speak to the new information. There's no need to restate what's already been stated in the public hearing, because this is a continuation of the earlier public hearing. As a reminder, the agency is made up of citizen volunteers. We have 5 in the meeting at the moment, and we have all been trained under the Department of the DEEP Commissioner training, and we've attended numerous annual sessions around the Connecticut statutes and the process for making a decision. Mary Rose, do you want to give a little bit more overview, and then I'll proceed from there.
Okay, just to note, Commissioner DeFlameri has entered the meeting. This is a continuation of the public hearing for 0305 and 325 Subway. The agency will use the MIWA regulations and Section 10 criteria for decision in making decisions on these applications. We have 3 people that have submitted information for the record, and those were added to the document links. And there is 1 person who has signed up to speak this evening after the applicants.
Great, thank you, Mary Rose.
Mm-hmm.
May I have a motion to hear all 3 items together on this evening?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. DeFlameri. I'm sorry, a second on the motion?
Second.
Who was the second? I'm sorry.
Julie Valvo.
You, Commissioner Valen, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Lisa, roll call vote, please.
Ranjit Bahav,
Yes.
Daniel Bedecker,
Aye.
Dave DeFlameri,
Yes.
Lisa Tryon,
Aye.
excuse me,
Aye.
sorry, Julie Valvo,
Yes.
Brendan Magnan.
Aye, the motion carries unanimously. Mary Rose, do you want to give an orientation before we invite the applicant to present any of the new information?
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you. This is a continuation of the public hearing for these items. At the last meeting, there was outstanding information that the agency had requested. That includes information on alternative 3 recommended by William Kenny, information on alternative 2 as shown by William Kenny, information on the impacts of alternative plans 1, 2, and 3 on the functions and values of the on-site and adjacent wetlands, a cross-section of the proposed grading and erosion sedimentation controls immediately adjacent to the wetlands and open space areas, proposed stormwater and water quality system maintenance plan, a spill prevention and cleanup plan for the facility. There was a question, are there any chemicals being sold from the warehouse? And if so, what type of chemical and what size containers will that chemical be in? And a question to save wetland impacts and removal of mature trees, has the applicant requested a waiver from P&Z for the minimum number of parking spaces required for their approval?
Great, thank you, Mary Rose. At this time, I'm going to invite the applicant to present on the information that we requested, as just summarized by Mary Rose. I'll turn it over to Attorney Crusade.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank you, Mary Rose and members of the agency. For the record, my name is Kevin Kersaden. My office is at 3 Lafayette Street here in Milford. With me this evening is the applicant, Bob Cinto, as well as Manny Silva, the project engineer from Rose Tiso, Pat Rose, the project architect, and William Kenny, the soil scientist. That comprises our project team for this evening. I will give a brief update of what has transpired since we last met from our side, and I will answer a couple of those questions, and I'll turn it over to Manny Silva first, who will be followed by Bill Kenny to address the other issues and do some or other questions and present some new materials and some new information. What's transpired since we last met is we've had gone back and forth with the city engineer with revised plans, including plans for the different alternatives. The city engineer had reviewed plans and the stormwater drainage report, replied back to Mr. Silva, who in turn then supplied the information to Mr. Podleski, the city engineer, who has issued a report that still references that he needs more time to look at additional information that came into his office. You may or may not know that he had vacation plans in between, so we were kind of under the gun with the tight timeline, but we diligently made our best efforts, and Manny Silva did a great job with that. We also had an opportunity, thankfully, to meet with the Economic Development Commission, just to tell them about the project and share some information on it. They had inland wetlands related questions, because I told them our current posture was we were in front of inland wetlands. And then eventually, if we're approved by inland wetlands, we would go to planning and zoning. They had some very good questions. They asked for some additional information, which Manny Silva then provided in the form of a letter. The relevant portions to your agency are pretty clear, where there's a paragraph or two about the stormwater treatment and any impact on wetlands. So I provided that information to the agency for the record, so that I thought it was a very nice summary by Mr. Silva. I've also uploaded to the City Squared filing system, presented to Mary Rose, and I think her and Taft has uploaded documents to the agenda, which is revised stormwater drainage report, some revised plans based on the city engineer's comments, and then Bill Kenny had provided alternatives and mitigation and some responses to some of the questions, which he can also go over in more detail tonight. Lastly, to answer two of the questions, are there any chemicals that will be sold on site? I checked with Mr. Cinto, checked with the potential end user, and the answer was absolutely not. There's no plans to store or sell any chemicals from the location. The second question was, would we consider a zoning either waiver or some other mechanism or way to reduce the required amount of parking? The answer to that is yes, we can pursue that. As it stands right now, we need to present a zoning compliant plan to the zoning office. We can't presume that they would, agree to anything, but I will say that the plan that we would present, there's a couple different ways I can do that. One way is we can ask for a finding of parking adequacy based on the hours of operation or just the general operations of the facility. The second way is, and the Planning and Zoning Board has within their regulations the ability to grant that if they see fit based on the evidence that's eventually presented to them. And then the other way is as part of a zone text amendment, which we're going to have to submit anyway for some of the uses that are going to be on in this district that are not currently, which is the warehouse use, which are not currently specifically allowed. So we can make it part of a zone text amendment application as well, based on the end users, what they believe is their required parking, and then what zoning may or may not think they can agree to based on the evidence that we present at that time. So there's no guarantee that we can reduce the parking sufficiently to alleviate any impact on wetlands or reduce the parking spaces significantly from what's currently proposed. But I spoke with the applicant, who is willing to look at that and make that effort when the time is ripe to do so. So we are aware of that, and we would like to work on that. Other than that, unless there's any questions for me based on that information I just gave, I would like to be followed by Mr. Silva. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Crusaden. Mr. Silva?
Good evening, Commissioners, Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Manny Silva from Rose Teasel and Company. I'm the civil engineer licensed in the state of Connecticut, representing the applicant. I'd like to just share a quick letter that we have in response to the city engineer. I think I have to just be, I guess sharing is disabled right now. It's saying the host has to enable it. But so basically the comments that the city engineer.
Sorry, Mr. Silva.
Okay.
Mary Rose, can you enable sharing, please?
Sorry, I thought that was on.
No problem.
Go ahead.
All right, here you go. So I have here's my response to the city engineer. He's just asking us for a record map merging all the lots, which we'll provide prior to any building permit if we are approved here today, or not today, but from this commission. The drawings, he wanted some clarification on the delineation of the wetlands, which we did, and then we updated our setbacks, but not setback, but upland review areas, because some of the wetlands lies in the open space zone, which is the Mondo Park area. So those areas have to show 150-foot upland review area on the plans. So he was saying, again, there was just some clarification that needed to be done on the soil erosion control plan as to where the wetland flags were relative to topography. We cleaned that up. He wants us to protect some curbs and sidewalks in the city right away and replace them as needed. We're fine with that. He wanted us to add some silt fence along in the option A, he wanted us to add some silt fence along. Let me just pull this up here. Why isn't it coming up? Hold on a second here. Show all windows, this one, share. Want us to show some, hopefully it's showing the right one now. Oh. Minimize that. Share.
We see.
Three. Yep, yeah, you see the soil erosion control plan, I hope. So he wanted us to expand the wetland, the reinforced silt fencing around this area here all the way up. And then which we had it ending here, but he just wanted us to make sure that it came around and returned. So that's that. I just want to just quickly go through everything so that you know what actually changed on the plans. And then he reserves the right to additional comments, which we have no issue, addressing and complying with any additional requirements from the city engineer. Disturbing. I think this is really has to do with Mr. Kenny's mitigation plan, and that will comply. And then he had some concern with some ornamental landscaping that's in the parking lot, but which we don't have any issue revising the plans to address that. And then he asked for this is like the big one, stormwater mitigation calculations to be in accordance with the 31, which was we had did an analysis over the whole disturbed area, and since this lot is 10.61 acres, he was asking why wasn't the analysis basically taking up the whole site. He wanted us to include all the undisturbed off-site areas in the calculations, which we did. And that's basically what the change is in the engineering report. So there's some flow that falls on areas that are undisturbed, like the wetland area, some areas here in the forested wooded areas, and some here near Mondo Pond. So we added those bypass areas, they're called, to the calculations. And the reason why they're called bypass areas is because as the rain falls in these areas, they don't go into the stormwater system. They bypass the system itself and then go off into the wetlands. So that didn't really affect the actual design of the system, due to the fact that they were basically bypassing the system before, and they're going to do that after. So it's an unchanged hydrology, but he wanted the calculations to encompass those areas. He's saying here he hasn't had enough time to go over the calculations, but that's basically what we submitted to him. And again, if he has any other further questions, we can work that out. And then he has the right to reserve. He has the right to add any additional comments later on. And as we know, that going through zoning and stuff, I'm sure we'll have correspondence from the town engineer going forward, and even into the building permit process. So that's his letter. And as I said, as far as changes to the plan itself, there really wasn't much except for those things I just went over. And then there was that letter issued to
I'm
the
sorry,
economic development. Go ahead.
Sorry, Mr. Silver.
Sorry. Yep.
What's the date of this letter that you're referring to? July 3rd.
Right, July 3rd. I think Mary Rose provided it. It's just basically what my presentation was in the first meeting about how the treatment train is important to preserving the stormwater quality of the stormwater coming off the site, and the reduction of actual peak volume coming off the site is beneficial to the adjacent areas. It's kind of a summary of that presentation, if the commissioners want to go through and look at it again. And I think that's basically it. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Kenny, who has some summaries on what all the different alternatives are and how they're different and what benefits they have. So,
yeah.
thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is Kevin Crusade. May I interrupt just momentarily?
Yes, Mr. Crusade. you have the
So I
floor.
just want to clarify, is your question about the letter to the date of the letter to the city engineer, or was it the date of the letter to the Economic Development Office?
The former, but I do believe that you wanted to present the other letter to the development office as well. I'd like to see that.
Yeah, I think I think Mr. Silva is sharing that now, but the date of the letter to the city engineer that he just went over was June 30th.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was asking.
Clarification. Yeah, okay. And then the second letter to the EDC is July 3rd date.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
All right, I'll stop sharing and then go over to Mr. Kenny, and then I'll be here for any questions and I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Silva. Mr. Kenny?
Yes, good evening, Bill Kenny, Principal of William Kenny Associates at Fairfield. I'm a professional wetland scientist, soil scientist, and landscape architect. At the last meeting with the public hearing that we attended, I reviewed with you 3 different plans for the development of the initial plan that was submitted with, and each one of these I focused on activities related to wetland impacts and associated mitigation activities. So the first plan was the plan that was submitted with the application, and then there were 2 alternative plans. So since that time, the second alternative plan at the last meeting was conceptual. We developed a detailed plan for that and submitted that to you for your review. And I'd like to review that with you this evening. And then what I've done is summarized some critical information from each plan as it relates to wetlands. And I also added some information regarding upland areas that are associated with those wetlands. And then I also, I focused on quantifiable factors there, area, length, things like that. So we measured those things and provided that in a summary table. And then I have another table where I look at wetland functions and did a qualitative review and comparison between the 3 designs for that. So I'll share my screen and go through this. Don't want that. It's not giving me the option to share more than one document at a time, which I was hoping to do. Oops, pulling up a whiteboard.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Kenny, is he not giving you ability to share or just not share multiple screens?
Multiple files at once. So
Don't know if that's an option.
usually I can share the screen, the entire screen with, and it'll show whatever's on. And for some reason, well, I'll just have to proceed without showing more than one file at a time. I'll start with the initial plan. And as you may recall, this is a view of the northwest corner of the property. I'll go through this very quickly. And with this plan, there was that stormwater basin wetland that was proposed to be removed in its entirety. And then we were going to create new wetland immediately to the north of that and immediately adjacent to relatively undisturbed forested wetland to the north. And then we had the plan that had improvements that were off-site in the Mondo Pond areas, and we went through all of that. Now, since your last meeting, we provided this plan. So this is all what we're calling alternative 2, because there was the initial plan and then 2 alternatives. This is a view of, again, the northwest corner of the property. Up in the top right-hand corner of the drawing, you can see the entire property where we have a location map, and it shows the focus of the detailed plan on the left of the drawing. But at the bottom of the page, you can see that we've preserved much of the existing wetland, much of the existing stormwater woodland wetland that occurs in that area, just eliminating an area about 1,800 square feet to allow for a driveway, access driveway up to the building and to allow access into the building. And so we're preserving vast majority of the wetland. In order to do that, we ended up moving parking north of that, where in the initial plan we had proposed creating wetland in this area, but now we're proposing creating parking in an upland area rather than creating parking in a wetland area. We have expanded with the mitigation that we're showing here. We are creating new wetland immediately adjacent to this stormwater woodland wetland to offset the loss of the wetland on the right for the driveway. So at the end, there's slightly more wetland area here. And then we also are proposing to stop the mowing that's occurring in that area. That area is currently maintained, that has shade trees, and then there's really, I don't think there's one shrub in that whole area. So it's no shrubs, and it's not mown as regularly as a golf course, but it's mown somewhat frequently throughout the year, so that it's primarily just grasses and some few other ground cover plants growing there. And what we propose is that mowing stop, that we plant an abundance of new trees in that area. We're looking at planting about 70 trees in the wetland and immediately adjacent to it. We would also propose planting shrubs in this area and then allowing the ground cover to establish and be more of a natural wetland habitat area. So we'd be ensuring that the total area of the wetland is not less than what it is today, but we'd also improve its functions with regard to habitat and other improvements with stormwater management and native flora and wetland fauna. With regard to the parking area to the north, there was questions about how that might affect the wetland immediately to the east with the removal of that forest. There's a couple of ways that might affect that wetland. The primary way is water management, and that today when rain falls in that forest area, the trees and plants intercept the rain, and what's not intercepted by the plants is then primarily infiltrated into the soil and then hits the groundwater at some depth and then slowly makes its way to the wetland. And through that process, the rainwater is cleaned, it's cooled, or it's not allowed to get hot. And so it's a healthy environment for the wetland. So we recognize when you put a parking lot here instead of a forest, you're going to change that. But the stormwater management system is designed to mitigate those changes. The water would be collected. It would be then treated, cleaned, run through the various stormwater management practices that were described at your last meeting for cleaning water. Then the water would be discharged below grade and infiltrated through the soil in the same way that it would today with the forest condition. So it would allow the water to be cooled as it runs through the stormwater management system, and then as it runs through the underlying soils, and then it would reach the groundwater and then slowly move towards the wetland as it does today. So the project's stormwater management system would mitigate for the changes that would result from introduction of a paved surface instead of a forested surface. Another potential factor that could affect the wetland might be additional sunlight reaching the wetland, where now the upland forest is casting some shade over into the wetland area. The wetland itself is forested, so it protects itself. It does a good job of protecting itself in and of itself. But in recognition that there might be additional sunlight coming from the side, we're proposing to plant a full row of evergreen trees all along the edge of the parking lot. And then also along the northern edge of the parking lot. And this will help to limit the amount of sunlight that it gets to the wetland at the lower levels of through the lower levels of the forest. When you remove the trees in a forested area, because of the shade of the forest, there aren't lower limbs on the forest trees. So when you open up a side of a forest like that, you still have a canopy up high on the edge, but on the sides, there's not a lot of vegetation to help mitigate sunlight. So we would put in evergreen trees to provide that mitigation. So those are the three designs, the initial design and two alternatives. And what I've done is prepared a couple of now I figured out how to do this, what I was trying to do earlier. Let me see if this worked. So on the right, I have a table. It's titled Wetland and Associated Upland Conditions for the initial plan, alternate 1, and alternate 2 plans. We just prepared this afternoon and provided this early evening, about an hour or so ago. I apologize for that, but what we've listed on the left are what's the acreage of existing wetlands on the site and then we have 3 columns to the right of that. We have the initial plan, alternate 1 plan, and alternate 2. So existing wetlands, the size of those, it's all the same under all 3 plans because it's an existing condition. And then you have wetland disturbance or loss, and you can see under the initial plan and alternate one where we do mitigation in the park, the amount of wetland loss is the same. When you get to alternate 2, the amount of wetland loss is substantially less. And then wetland creation, under the initial plan, we had basically a 1-to-1, or we had slightly more than a 1-to-1 ratio for creating new wetland to offset the wetland loss. When you look at the alternate 1, where the offsite work by Mondo Ponds is primarily, there's some wetland improvements, but it's primarily upland improvements and trail improvements. So there's not really any wetland creation to offset the loss. And then the alternate 2, we have slightly more wetland creation than we have with wetland loss. So the next row, it's proposed total wetland area. You can see for the initial plan and alternate 2, you end up with the same amount of wetland area, slightly more, a few hundred square feet more than you do today. With the alternate 1 plan, you end up with slightly less wetland area. Wetland enhancement activities, there's with the initial plan, there's really no additional enhancement activities. We're creating new wetland, and the primary focus of the mitigation is on creating new wetland. On alternate 1, there are some enhancement activities along the trail that help to improve wetlands in alternate 1, and that has to do with putting in the boardwalks and the bridges. Those features help the wetlands protect from soil erosion, soil compaction from people using the trails. And then alternate 2, in addition to creating new wetland and making sure that the total wetland area is no less, we are enhancing the rest of the existing wetland. So there's quite a bit of enhancement under alternate 2. And then upland woodland loss, I put this in, this is primarily related to the woodland north of the parking area, or north of the entrance drive in the northwest corner of the site. So with the initial plan, there's about 0.2 of an acre of upland forest that's lost. The alternate plan, there's no loss because it's offsite mitigation. And then the alternate 2, it's close to 0.4 of an acre of woodland loss by putting the parking lot in the northwest corner. Then there is upland woodland enhancement. There's quite a bit on the town property, and that occurs along the trail. It occurs, there's one area in the northwestern corner of the open space property where we're restoring some woodland. So we've totaled up what that acreage is. And also with the alternate 1, we're doing trail improvements along about 3,600 linear feet of trail. That's removing the invasive plants along the side of it and so forth. It's primarily in upland areas. And then there is some temporary disturbance of upland in both the initial plan and the alternate plan 2, where the woodland is disturbed but then replanted. So let me see. That provides a quantitative comparison summary of the 3 different plans. I have a qualitative review. So if you look at the functions, the wetland functions for the stormwater wetland, this wetland here, the woodland stormwater wetland, under the existing plan, it's because it's been impacted, it's primarily related to stormwater management, that its functions are moderate for functions related to stormwater management, water management. Other functions are relatively low. The habitat is relatively low. And then under the initial plan, the stormwater functions are going to be maintained because the proposal is to, or on your screen, are you seeing just the table?
We are just seeing the table.
Okay. Well, on the existing plan, on the initial plan, the stormwater functions will be maintained because there's going to be a subsurface infiltration system that will have the same storage capacity as that basin itself. And so those functions will be substantially the same, but provided with a stormwater management feature rather than the open basin wetland itself. You will lose all of the habitat value. So we're saying that under both the initial plan and alternate 1, you lose the vegetation in that area and whatnot. With alternate 2, you will see a slight increase, except the only one that you won't see an increase in is the groundwater discharge, but you're going to see a slight increase in all the functions. So with alternate 2, the wetland itself will be slightly larger, and then all of its functions will increase slightly.
May I ask Mr. Kenny a question?
No, not at this time. I will recognize the public in a moment. Thank you.
Just one other thing with the initial plan, although you lose the habitat value, this plan, as you recall, includes the mitigation adjacent to the wetland to the north. So you have substantial increase in the functional capacity of that wetland, although the stormwater woodland wetland, you eliminate that habitat value, you do pick it up with the creation of the wetland that's adjacent to the northern wetland. So I might try to summarize this a little bit even further. The initial plan, you have more wetland loss up front. And you have you also have some wetland function improvement. Alternate one, you have more public benefits with the work offsite on the town land. You have less wetland benefits, and you have a minor drop in your wetland functioning. And then alternate two, the last alternate, you end up with significantly less wetland impact to start with. And you have I think, a significant increase in the wetland function. And that's why I had said at the last meeting, I thought alternate two was what I would recommend be pursued. I think it fits, in addition to having less impact and higher function, slightly more wetland at the end of the day. I think it's also more in keeping with a policy of most towns where first you try to avoid impacts, and then where impacts are unavoidable, then you mitigate. And so that alternative falls right in line with that approach for wetland protection. I'd be pleased to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny. Mr. Crusaden, is there anything else you or the applicant team would like to add to the record that's new? Otherwise, we'll move to open up the public hearing for those who wish to speak against, and then those who wish to speak in favor, followed by those who are neither against or in favor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only thing Mr. Silva had briefly mentioned it, I would like to point out that our review from the city engineer doesn't stop with wetlands. If wetlands did act on this in the future, we would still be beholden to the city engineer going forward with the site plan and the other requirements. So it's not like there would be anything missed by the city engineer by the fact that he wasn't able to, make some final comments on those plans. So that's one thing. And I do think, Mr. Chair, there's a member from there's a member not of the public, but from the director of the Economic Development Commission, I believe Julie Nash is here. So I don't know at what point in time she would speak. She's not part of the applicant team, but she's present to talk tonight. And then I would only ask if Mr. Cinto had any brief comments he would like to make before we turn it over.
Thank you, Mr. Crusaden. Mr. Cinto, is there anything you'd like to say?
I just would like to thank everyone for their time. I'd like to thank my team for the effort they put in. I think this has been educational and has been very thorough. I appreciate working with your commission, and I think we put three very good options on the table for you. If it's at all possible, if I can possibly get a vote on it this evening, that'd be very much appreciated, because we're underneath certain timetables. But whatever you can do, I would appreciate it. Thank you very, very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Cinto. At this time, I'd like to invite any members of the public who wish to speak against the application, and then we'll open it up for those who would like to speak for, and then those who are classifying themselves as neither against nor for.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Diane Pryor has requested to speak. first.
Yes. Ms. Pryor, you have the floor.
Hi, my name's Diane Pryor. I live at 5 Audubon Close in Milford, Connecticut. So I'll change a little bit about what I was going to say because some of the questions were answered, but also I came up with a few more. My first impression, which is not written here, is that this seems to be an awful lot of mitigation for this one spot. It's just a lot. Which, in my opinion, seems like way too much for this one area on this one street. I'm still concerned about the impact of the wetlands. Obviously, I wouldn't be here. 160,000 square foot warehouse, 20 tractor trailer truck bays. I would still like more time for the public to look at this. We've been researching this and gathering more information, but we haven't had enough time to get everything together. I understand that there are timelines and I respect that, but I would like some more time. One of the things that came up in the last meeting was that the applicant stated the property will be more environmentally friendly, since in the past there have been up to 500 cars parking at the subway property. Those cars, I assume, belonged to subway employees who would come to work in the morning, stay all day, and leave them parked and then leave in the afternoon. So there wasn't a lot of coming and going. It seemed as if that was the comparison that I was getting, that they would just have stayed there. It's very different than having 20 tractor trailer trucks coming in and out of that property. And I'm also going to note too that the applicant stated in the last meeting that there would only be 12 truck bays being used at one time to load a trailer. It'll only be in the bay until a cab comes to take the parked trailer away. This was from what I heard and also from the meeting notes. This doesn't address the fact that the trailer trucks that will be arriving to unload the items are also going to be arriving and pulling into all of those bays. So that seems to have been disregarded completely in some of these answers. So it also doesn't really explain why there are 20 tractor trailer truck bays when only 12 would be needed. It would seem to me that if you're building 20 of them, you will need 20 of them. Even if it's not now, they'll be needed in the future. And that's a lot. That's a lot of trucks and a lot of truck bays. We continue to have concerns about the impact of diesel fuel particles that would be going into the air and blown over the wetlands and the ponds, landing on leaves and plants, also seeping into the ground and landing in the water. The cars that were previously parked there all day long most likely didn't release diesel fuel particles into the air. The tractor trailer trucks will not only be coming and going, but will most likely be idling on the property. So when the question was asked about this the last time, the applicant or representative stated that the air quality issues are under the auspices of the US DOT. And I understand that, but we don't know if there's been a study done to actually take a look at what that impact would be. Again, a lot of trucks pouring a lot of diesel fumes into the air. I think you may have already answered this, so I'll just throw it out there, but there was some discussion about what would happen if there was a spill of hazardous waste and byproducts in the ground. And when I was looking at the notes, I realized, I saw that there's there was mentioned a 24-hour call to clean up a spill, and that's good. I'm glad we have that, but a lot can happen in 24 hours or less. It can happen right away, the impact. So my question is, who's monitoring any of these things that are going to be inside the warehouse, and how is that monitoring going to be reported and to whom? I had also asked about garbage that would be in the garbage bins inside and outside the building during business hours. without having been removed before garbage trucks come. I'm concerned about whether some of them will be seeping, if they'll be airtight, and who is also going to be monitoring that. How far from the wetlands will the bins be placed? And will the sanitation companies that come in be made aware that there are sensitive soil and wetlands concerns on the property and abutting the property, and who will be continuing to monitor this? I had a question about the trees, so I'm glad that that came up. I think it was referred to as a maple forest in the last meeting. I could be wrong there. But Mr. Kenny was, I think it was Mr. Kenny was talking about removing that forest as part of one of the plans. And what that means when I'm hearing that said is that it's not just the trees that are being removed, the entire root system is being removed, which the root system itself is part of what keeps the wetlands together. And it is, so even though you might have it paved and you're going to have the water, the way, I'm just look at my notes here, the way the water was going to be mitigated and seeping through to keep the other area clear and safe from any kind of impact. What it doesn't do is replace the root system. And as we know, and we've seen this, we see this all the time, when the root systems are gone, that wetlands can't survive, but also the ground becomes loose underneath. And so we lose that entire thing if those trees go away. Yeah, and the other part about the shade, which I'm glad you brought that up, because the shade is very important. All of the water, the rain and all of that falls down, as we've seen the last several days, it does get absorbed into the trees. It does go down and it goes into the right spots. Again, the root system, that's where it goes. So, and then the other question that I had, and I just want to check something here, I'm sorry. Yeah, you'll be happy, this is the last thing I have. Over the weekend, and especially yesterday on the 4th of July, this entire state suffered with torrential rains. I was driving in them, not fun. Lots and lots of rain, lots of puddles, lots of rivers going down the roads. And even on the news, there was a place where there was construction being done up in Rocky Hill where the water was so bad that mud and water just went right into some condominiums that were close by abutting the property.
Excuse me, Ms. Pryor.
Yeah.
Please make it relevant to this application.
Okay, well, I am. I'm just making the analogy to this. So my concern is, having seen all of that, and I know that there are systems in place for normal water runoff, but what plans are being made to protect the wetlands if the area is again saturated with the deluge, to keep loose ground during construction pouring into the sensitive wetlands? So is there a plan for that as well? That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak against this application? I see Julie, you've raised your hand. Are you interested in speaking against the application or for? And you're on mute. You're on mute.
I am interested in speaking for when the time is right. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Ms. Moran. You just have to unmute yourself, please. And as a reminder, please limit your comments to 5 minutes, please.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
Just a concern I have, as Diane asked, about the 20 truck bays. When if they're only needing 12, why are we doing 20? Why is he planning to do 20? I know it's probably future growth. And then the other question I have is, what happens if this tenant leaves or if the deal falls through? and for in the future. What impact will that have on the plans that are being proposed for this building? And how is that going to be accommodated? Because at that point, the permitting process is completed. You know, the tenant leaves and then a new tenant goes in. At that point, you know, they may have, 50 trucks a day or something. And then, the neighborhood is kind of, or in the area, the wetlands, everything is kind of at a loss at that point because it's past that. What happens at that point? That's all I have.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Anyone else interested to speak in opposition of this application? I believe Regine has her hand up. I'll recognize Mr. Platt after that, and Ali Pop after that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I actually have a question about the table. There is an item on the export of detritus, and I wanted to know what that meant.
Okay, is that the only question you have? Is that the only thing you wanted to?
And then the other question is, in terms of the parking lot, I understood that was being planned for an area close to the entrance to the Mondo trail system. Did I understand that correctly?
Okay, at this time, you can just state your questions. It's the applicant will respond to all the testimony after we finish. So it's not a back and forth. Any additional questions that you have? Or any additional testimony? Okay. Mr. Platt, you're recognized.
It's actually Mrs. Platt. I'm Jane Platt, 132 Platt Lane. And I've heard nothing about the impact on animals in the area. And I think that's something that we very much need to know about.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to this? Mr. Ali Pop.
Yeah, thank you for using the same nomenclature that my children use for me. I apologize. It's actually Alan Kohler, and I'm in Unit 29 in Audubon Close. This is a beautiful piece of property, a beautiful ecosystem, provides all sorts of intangible benefits to all of us. I think when we talk about mitigating effects and we talk about how to respond to accidents, I think, in my opinion, we need to understand that this ecosystem is delicate, and one bad accident is going to mean no more birds, no more turtles, no more fish. And why can't we just decide that we're not going to build a system right on the edge of this beautiful ecosystem that's going to entail the production of particulates, lead particulates, carbon dioxide production, nitric oxides are going to be produced. There's going to be a gradual degradation of this ecosystem. And it may not happen in one fell swoop, but it may happen over a period of time where, but then if there is in fact an accident, we're going to be sorry that we lost this piece of heaven.
Anything further?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Can Mrs. Platt, can you mute your line because we only have one person speaking at a time? Thank you. Anyone else wishing to be recognized in opposition to this application? Seeing none, I'm going to move to Julie. We're going to move to those speaking in favor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am speaking on behalf of the Economic Development Commission of Milford. Dear Chairman Magnet and fellow Inland Wetlands Agency members, I am speaking on behalf of the Economic Development Commission to express our enthusiastic support for the proposed project. We are pleased to extend our full endorsement of FCP Euro's plans to consolidate its multiple locations at the former international headquarters of Subway, which would mark a significant milestone in the growth of the company and a positive development for our local economy. FCP Euro has demonstrated remarkable success as a prominent player in the automotive parts industry, specializing in importing and selling genuine OE and OEM parts for European-made cars. Their commitment to excellence has been recognized by Inc. magazine, which includes FCP Euro among its 5,000 fastest growing private companies multiple times over the years. The company's impressive growth rate further attests their strong market position. Furthermore, FCP Euro's decision to establish its corporate headquarters and consolidate its operations in Milford highlights the region's attractiveness as a business hub. By selecting Milford, FCP Euro showcases its affinity for Connecticut and its commitment to investing in the local infrastructure. This decision not only brings economic benefits, but also reinforces the notion that homegrown organizations can thrive and remain in the state of Connecticut. The consolidation project proposed by FCP Euro entails the construction of a 160,000 square foot replacement facility following the demolition of the existing Subway headquarters building. As the project moves forward, we are confident that the Milford Inland Wetlands Agency will conduct a thorough review to ensure environmental considerations are met, and the Planning and Zoning Board will carefully evaluate the plans in line with the city's regulations. We further recognize FCP Euro's commitment to sustainability, environmental considerations in the Milford community. The Commission would like to emphasize the comprehensive measures the applicant has taken to enhance water quality in the neighboring Mondo Pond as part of the project. A prominent feature of the project is the incorporation of a water quality treatment train. This system is aimed at preserving and improving water quality with specific emphasis on protecting the adjacent Mondo Pond. The treatment train begins with the strategic placement of hooded catch basins throughout the project site. These basins serve as the first line of defense, effectively preventing floating oils and debris from entering the stormwater system. By capturing and intercepting these pollutants at their source, they will eliminate potential contamination risk to the delicate aquatic ecosystem of Mondo Pond. The applicant has taken numerous strides to enhance the surrounding environment while also maintaining and building economic growth in the region. The Economic Development Commission fully recognizes the significance of FCP Euro's presence in Milford and the positive impact it will have on our community. The company's choice to remain in Connecticut reflects their dedication to the area and their desire to continue building upon the foundations they have established here. FCP Euro's commitment to creating job opportunities both through this project and an additional 300 to 500 workers they plan to hire over the next decade further contributes to the economic vitality of our region. We wholeheartedly believe that FCP Euro's consolidation project will not only enhance the local business landscape, but also foster continued growth and innovation within our community. As the Economic Development Commission, we are proud to support such initiatives that drive economic prosperity and demonstrate our commitment to attracting and retaining successful companies like FCP Euro. Thank you for considering our viewpoint, and we trust that you will recognize the immense value that FCP Euro project brings to Milford. We're excited about the possibilities that lie ahead and look forward to collaborating with all relevant parties to ensure a smooth and successful implementation of this significant undertaking. Should you require any additional information or assistance, please do not hesitate to contact the EDC. We remain at your disposal to provide any further support necessary to advance this project. Sincerely, Ani Chaghatzbanian, Chair of the Economic Development Commission. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing us to speak.
Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this application? Seeing none, is there anyone who would like to be recognized in the category of neither speaking in favor or opposed? Seeing none, I will hand it back over to Mr. Crusaden for your response to the testimony that we just heard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that those questions will be answered by different individuals on our project team. So I think some of them are business point questions or relative to that. So I would ask Mr. Cinto if he had any comments to address regarding the number of truck bays or what happens if a property goes dark or the project fails, he'd probably be the best individual on our team to answer that at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Cinto.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I'd like to just comment on the trucks. Yeah, I know it's a little confusing when we said about 12 trucks come each day and leave each day, and we have 20 docks. And the reason that we have 20 docks is that these trucks go all over the East Coast. They go to Georgia, they go to New Jersey, they go to Maine. They don't leave until there's enough merchandise on the truck to justify the truck moving. So these trucks actually sit there during the day, no cab, until the truck is filled up and then it leaves. So that is the reason why there's 20 trucks, but we said there's only 12 a day that come and go. So I hope that answers that question. The other major consideration is right now you have about 550 cars in this lot that's dumping grease and oil into those wetlands with no treatment at all. Because when this building was built, they didn't have the environmental concerns that they have today. With this project built, it will drastically improve the quality of the water going into your wetlands. So it doesn't really matter who's the tenant in this building. Those improvements have been made to those wetlands, and that's in perpetuity. I hope that answers that question, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Cinto.
And I'd like to ask Mr. Silva to address any site-related questions that came up.
Hi, this is Manny Silva from Rose Tizo, a civil engineer. Again, I just want to reiterate what Mr. Cinto had said. I think what Mr. Cinto means by 12, he's saying that there's going to be 12 movements per day on site. So all the 20 docks will be occupied with a trailer, but only 12 movements of those trailers are happen on or off the site per day. As number two, someone mentioned about idling. There's no benefit to idling a truck on property. If a truck's pulled into a dock and it's parked, it should be, I mean, it'll be turned off. There's no, like I said, there's no benefit to idling a truck in place with, sure, even though, you know, that no one wants to burn diesel needlessly. And again, the intensification of there's a reduction in intensification of use here, even though the building is a larger size. The impact to the wetlands with the basically on vehicle movements and traffic, with the amount of spaces there was with subway. Yeah, you had people coming in and parking, but they did move about all day with the salesmen and people training. So in my opinion, my professional opinion, I think the intensification of the use is a reduction in intensification, not an increase. About the spill response, the spill response is a 24-hour DEP program that has a roster of environmental cleanup companies that get rotated. So the response time for that is, it's within the hour. If sometimes I think they're required to be on a site, once they've been activated or called in, something like they're usually there around 15-20 minutes. But what the 24 hours doesn't mean that it takes 24 hours. There's always someone there to answer that call. So what they have is a roster of environmental companies, and if Connecticut Tank doesn't respond, they go to ERS or Safe Harbors, or I forget the other ones. There's some other one called Coastal. As far as the garbage pickup, a warehouse like this mostly just generates cardboard. So there'll be like a cardboard compactor that then will be sent off for recycling. It's not something that you'll see a dumpster with anything that's going to leak. Like they're not throwing out machine parts or parts or anything like that. The intent of here is to bring the manufactured parts on site, box them, and then bring them, distribute them out to other locations. So it's mostly cardboard. Number 5, soil erosion controls, which he spoke to, was basically our soil erosion control plan is to control any runoff from the site during construction when it's not stable, meaning that there's no grass or trees, and our stormwater controls haven't been put in place, or at least partially in place. So that's why we have basically our SP3, which is our soil erosion control plan, which meets the 2002 State of Connecticut soil erosion control requirements. Plus, due to the size of this project, we're going to file a stormwater general permit for construction activities with the DEP. And with that, there will be even further oversight controls on site for activities during construction, and a whole laundry list, basically a whole manual on how to operate the site during construction and how to control and to basically ensure that there is no turbid discharge or any kind of discharge of storm water has any kind of construction debris or soil that leaves the site. And how that is accomplished is basically with some temporary sedimentation traps, diversion swales, and then there will be a logbook that's in that general permit that'll be sent to the DEP, where we keep track, and it'll be monitored during all storm events to ensure that there isn't anything leaving the site. I think that's all the things I had written down. So if Mr. Kenny has something to say, I think we'll go send it over to him.
Thank you, Mr. Silva. Mr. Kenny?
Yes, I think there might be only one item remaining that would apply to me. And there was a question about, in the summary table regarding wetland functions, there was a question about detritus. And in use in this context, it has to do with the food chain, and detritus can mean waste, but not in this situation. It's actually organic material, whether it be plants or animals that have been decomposed by microorganisms and allowed to move from one system to another, like from a wetland area to an open water area, a river or stream, a pond or Long Island Sound. And wetlands can be very important to providing detritus to downstream water bodies, where the detritus is critical to the food chain. So that's why it's listed as a potential function of wetlands. And depending on how the situation of the wetland, it may be able to provide a lot of detritus or may not provide much at all. So.
And Mr. Kenny, could you just elaborate on the concept that was surfaced in and around the tree roots and the mitigation concepts, just for the general public's knowledge? As you designed the application or designed the options, did you take those into consideration? If so, how so?
Yes, that has been taken into consideration. And although this evening we didn't get into it in great detail, we did at the last meeting, and it has to do with the stormwater management plan and how the proposed plan will manage the quality, quantity of water flowing from the site. And the roots are, in a forest, the roots are critical for stabilizing the soil, keeping the trees standing structurally, and providing nutrients and water, air. But once an area is converted from forest to a parking lot, then we rely on the stormwater management features, practices that are being proposed to clean the water, manage the water. The pavement itself prevents erosion. And during construction, we have soil erosion and sediment control measures that help to control erosion and sedimentation. But at the end of construction, you have the pavement itself, and then vegetated areas around the pavement that control erosion. And again, you have the stormwater structures to manage stormwater. So that was taken into consideration with our review of the project.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kenny. And Mr. Kusaden, I didn't hear anyone respond to the question around what if the application is approved and the development falls through. Can you, or Mr. Cinto, can you talk to that question?
Before I speak and give my, I guess, comments on that, I don't know if Mr. Cinto has some comments he'd like to make on that.
Mr. Cinto, you're on mute.
Yes, you know, Mr. Chairman, is really part of the business. This is a very good company, a very growth company. So we're very optimistic that this project is going to be built and completed. They need this facility. What we didn't talk about is that they're going to occupy the other two buildings on the other side of the street. So if they have an office component and they're going to have a model component. So it is really an ideal campus for them for the long term. It's very hard to find properties like this off the turnpike. The land, I mean, we talked about it last week, that the office market is just non-existing in this part of the state right now. There's no one taking new office space. So this is a very good use for the property, and it should be it's a real plus to the community. And we don't anticipate it falling through. If it does fall through, and then we have to find another tenant, and if it's with a different tenant, we'll have to come back to you with a different application. But this is what we have, and we hope to move ahead with it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just have a few follow-up comments to that. So there is so for example, if the project were approved and it fell through or was delayed or did not happen, there is a 5-year initial expiration period on the inland wetlands permit, so that if regulations change or technology changes, there is an that's put in place so that a new application would have to come back in. Applications do get approved and sometimes they don't get built, which we hope is not the case here. We hope it does get approved and that it does get built. But if a tenant's using it and they decide to leave the facility, even though it's unlikely, but to answer the question, they would have to seek a new tenant, or as Mr. Cinto said, come back in with a different project for a different user in the future. I did want to comment on, there's another thing that goes on during the construction process that is, it's typically part of your conditions of approval, which are monitoring logs that are required. Mary Rose requires that an applicant keep weekly, or a permit holder keep weekly logs for a project of this size. And it also, it sounds like it'll be monitored by state DEP as well. And that is to make sure that the soil and erosion control and sedimentation control features stay in place during the critical construction timeframe. I wasn't sure about the question about the parking or the application near the part of the site development or improvements near Mondo Ponds. We're seeking for a redevelopment of an existing site that is adjacent to Mondo Ponds, but I don't think that anything we've done is since the last hearing is any closer to any entrance for Mondo Ponds, but we're not going outside of our property boundaries in any way, shape, or form, other than the stormwater runoff, which we've had a lot of testimony about tonight. So we believe this is a very strong application that balances the need for economic development with the need for protection of the environment and of the inland wetlands. And we believe that we've submitted substantial testimony into the record from experts, our soil scientist and site engineer, and Mr. Cinto himself is a development expert. And we would ask that you take that into consideration and if possible, close the hearing and act on it tonight if that's something that is within your ability and comfort level to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crusaden. The only other comment I would offer, and before I offer that, we are going to now open it up for follow-up testimony from members of the public in opposition to speak only on the new information that was just presented. And we're also going to invite anyone that wants to speak in favor based on, and again, the new information that was just discussed. It's not an opportunity to repeat something that's already been said. And lastly, the category I mentioned before, those that may have a question, either a general question about the information that was just presented, but you don't consider yourself in favor or against. So those three categories. Before I invite the first category, I just want to make a reference to the comment that was made by the Platts in reference to animals. I just want to acknowledge that, this commission takes into consideration, as we've already said, section 10 of the criteria for any application, be it a small application or a large application. And strictly speaking, in this case, we don't have any testimony regarding, endangered turtles or any vernal pools. So those are not under consideration. But our purview is limited to those categories under the state statutes. So hopefully that clarifies for the record. As I said before, we consider section 10 as part of our criteria, and we're mandated to do that by state law. Julie, if you could just lower your hand for me so I know if you're actually wanting to speak or not. You still have your hand up. I'm going to now open it up for those who want to speak again. In opposition, please use your raise your hand feature so I know who's interested in speaking. I see a physical hand. Ali Pop, I'm going to recognize you first.
A couple of things were said, for example, about the fact that there's no.
Mr. Alley, if you could restate your name and address, I'm sorry, for the record.
Sure, Alan Kohler, Unit 29, Audubon Close.
Thank you.
A couple of things were said. One was like, for example, there's no benefit to idling, so that you wouldn't get a truck sitting in the bay just pumping out the pollution, which then finds its way as particulates into the water of the pond. I mean, that's nice to say that. My question would be, is that something that would be a requirement? Would it actually say somewhere, for example, these trucks can't sit and idle? Or is that just something that we have to just take the word of the folks who own the building that they're never going to do such a thing?
Anything else?
No, I guess that's it.
Okay. Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Pryor, I'm going to recognize you next.
Okay. Diane Pryor, Club Audubon Close in Milford. I'm still confused about the way the trees are going to be addressed with the root system. And I'm also still confused about the same answer that we have about 12 trucks versus 20 trucks. Are there going to be 12 trucks a day? Are there going to be 12 trucks sitting a day and 12 more trucks coming in every day? Because the items that need to be loaded onto a trailer truck must have been offloaded from another trailer truck. So that's very concerning to me. I don't understand that. And I understand that there's an economic boost to all of this, but right now we're really concerned about the impact to the wetlands. So that does concern me that we might be putting the economy over something that has been so so preserved and taken care of up until this point. And the other issue that I had, question that I had, was the part about where it was stated that there were used to be 500 cars dumping grease and oil onto the parking lot and into the wetlands. And I did not know that that was a case, and I'm wondering where that information came from. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Pryor. Ms. Moran?
About that. I guess my concern is the issue with what Ms. Nash has said about the growth of FCP. They have been growing at a rapid pace over the last few years. And the intent, I assume, is to continue to grow. How will that impact the trucks that are coming in? And what is FCP intending? I mean, I've read articles about them, and they plan to continue to grow. They are one of the fastest growing companies in the country. How is that going to impact us? We've been told for other, that they will be staying. Well, we also thought Subway and Big would stay, and they both vacated. So the concern is things change over time, and you give these permits out, and so that for the existing companies coming in, 5 years, 10 years, there's always changes going on. How will that impact us? That's basically what I have to say.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Tomato? You're on mute,
You're on
Mr.
mute.
Tomato. You've got to unmute yourself.
I was hitting the microphone that was muted as opposed to hitting the blue button on top. I want to comment on.
Sorry, can you state your name and address for the record?
Oh, I'm sorry, sure. Thomas DiMatteo, and I live at 5 Audubon Close here in Milford. I want to comment on the Economic Development Commission comments. One of the things that we always seem to focus on when it comes to economic development is, hold on one second. Di, you got to mute. I hear, I'm getting an echo. Sorry about that. One of the things we focus on when we talk about economic development is jobs and taxes, which obviously are important to all of us. And we all want to see our tax rate kept down. We all want to see jobs for the citizens of Milford. However, we seem to ignore the value to the town, both economically as well as culturally and recreationally, of a unique wetland, a unique piece of property like Mondo Ponds. Economic development is great, but to sell your soul to get it doesn't seem to make much sense. And I think that's what we're being asked to do here. So while I certainly appreciate the efforts of the Economic Development Commission to bring in business and to see business grow, I think that there's a greater downside to the degrading of valuable recreational piece of property. I also feel that we seem to be ignoring, we seem to be speaking out of from two different perspectives on the same point. On one hand, we're constantly being told how 500 cars a day were coming to the subway property, and now we're only going to have 175. And then we hear the Economic Development Commission saying, well, they expect to grow by another 500 more employees in the next 10 years. I assume they're going to be, unless they're taking a bus or a subway to work, they're going to be driving. So we're going to be back to the 500 parking spaces. So now we'll have the huge impact of a warehouse and the same parking impact we had prior. So those are my two comments. I think that while we, I think the commission has, the Inland Wetlands Commission has a very difficult decision to make here. Oh, excuse me, one last point. I understand that once if this is approved by this commission, the next step is planning and zoning. I would, as as a question, asked what would be the application to planning and zoning. I heard the term used by the attorney of a text change, a text amendment. Is that the same as a zone change, or is that just something else that I'm not aware of? So I would appreciate if council could address that. Thank you. And I'm going to take my hand down.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else wishing to speak that spoke before in opposition? If not, I'm going to recognize Julie. Please go ahead, Julie.
Thank you, Commissioner Magnin. I just wanted to respond in regards to economic development questions. The Milford Economic Development Commission comes from a live, work, play, holistic view. We would not be here speaking in support of this project if it did not fulfill those 3 buckets. The commission took into consideration that Mr. Cinto and Attorney Kersaden came and spoke with our commission about all sorts of topics related to this project. And we were really in support of those 3 buckets that we live by: live, work, play. And when we talk about regional growth or company growth, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's 500 employees in the city of Milford. But as you know, in a headquarters like Subway or like an FCP Euro, 500 jobs doesn't necessarily mean there are 500 jobs in Milford. It's 500 jobs across the country. I don't know if most of you know, but FCP Euro just recently opened up another facility in Arizona with a tremendous amount of growth there. They anticipate opening up other facilities across the country and pursuing more automotive parts, not just necessarily European, but moving into other, maybe Japanese or American cars. So when I speak of growth, I mean growth for the company, but headquartered here in Milford, Connecticut, which is a great thing for our city. So I hope you take that into consideration as you move forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Julie. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this application on matters that we have discussed? Hearing none. Anyone wishing to speak on a non-classified, neither for or neither against? Specifically around the questions that were just the information that was just presented by the applicants. Seeing none, I'm going to give the applicants one last opportunity to respond to the additional testimony, and then we're going to open it up for some additional questions and discussion from the commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kevin Kersaden. I'll take, I think, one of the last questions first. A zone text amendment would be, it is a regulation change. There is an application form for a zone text amendment. It is not a zone change, but you can request the Planning and Zoning Board based on a variety of different factors to amend zoning regulations. So that's what we would be filing in addition to a site plan application with the zoning office if this were to be approved at some point. With respect to the parking increase, and I think Mrs. Nash had spoken about the, it's not 500 employees in Milford, but there's a secondary part of that. The application that we have is what we're asking the commission to act on tonight, but there would not be any additional space for additional parking spaces on this site. We're actually trying to see if we can reduce the parking a little bit as part of that zone text amendment. So there wouldn't be any additional parking on this site. And I just want to make it very clear because there seems to be some blurring. We're not proposing any changes to Mondo Ponds, except for one of our proposed alternatives was an attempt at some enhancements to the trails that would help with soil erosion control, which in turn we believe, according to Mr. Kenny, would have a benefit to the wetlands, and also some invasive species removal that would have a potential benefit to the water quality, which we in turn think would benefit in the wetlands, according to Mr. Kenny. So I want to make it very clear that, you know, we're not destroying Mondo Ponds or taking any action on Mondo Ponds. It's based on the presentations of the professionals and their opinions that we're actually having the water quality either equal to or improved based on the treatment that's been presented. And the habitat, depending on which alternative, if one was chosen for an approval, we would be either preserving existing habitat or enhancing some habitat, whether it would be on Mondo Ponds or elsewhere. With respect to the idling, I can, check with the applicant. I don't see why we couldn't have a no idling, condition of approval, but for some public benefit that maybe they weren't here at the first public hearing, we did talk about that the tractors don't stay, the trucks, the trailers stay. And I don't know if, Mr. Chairman, you'd like me to discuss the 12 versus 20 trucks. If you'd like me to take a shot at that explanation, just real briefly.
Sure.
My understanding of that is that it's 12 movements per day, as Mr. Silva and Mr. Cinto had said, not 20 trucks per day, so that there are potentially up to 20 trailers, not 20 tractor trailers, with the tractor being the engine, the motor part of that, could be at the loading docks. We wouldn't be able to expand the site beyond that, but that there would only be 12 movements of trucks per day. And I also would like to point out that Bick Drive, formerly known as Bick Drive in this section, aka also now known as Subway officially, I believe, is a major route down to an industrial area of the city that's heavily trafficked by trucks on a regular basis. Not that that's, I just want to put this into context. With respect to the change, and if things, Subway was supposed to be here forever and or indefinitely, and we understand that, but that's the reason why we have these applications and this turnover, because Subway was here for quite some time, and for different economic reasons, they're no longer going to be headquartered in Milford. But that opens the door. It's a real opportunity to keep another Milford business here in Milford. And you're actually, and maybe this will touch on briefly, the 550 cars versus the 175 cars, that will open up the door to not only economic development, but also an opportunity to increase the treatment to the stormwater runoff with a newly engineered new technology system that either wasn't available or was not required previously when the Subway headquarters building was built, and then the various parking lots were built, because it wasn't all one parking lot at once. They kind of added on the parking lots over time. And so the 550 cars and the respect to them dumping oil and grit and things is an indirect comment on the fact that right now, that number, many a car is carrying whatever they're carrying or leaking their engine fluids or coolant or whatever, is right now entering into a system that does not have the engineered treatment that we're proposing. So that's what that comment means, and therefore you would have a cleaner product, or as clean or cleaner product entering into the inland wetlands post treatment, because you don't have that level of dirt, grease, and number of vehicles in and out, causing that potential runoff into the stormwater management systems that don't have that treatment right now. So once again, Mr. Chair, based on the testimony from our professionals, we believe there's substantial evidence in the record to support this application, and I'm not aware of any substantial evidence that contradicts what our experts have presented over the past 2 hearing nights. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krusaden. At this time, we're going to transition to discussion and questions that the commissioners may have based on the new information that we heard this evening. Before I open it up to the commissioners, I would like to acknowledge that, as a reminder, members of this commission have been reviewing these applications of this nature for an abundance of years. I myself have been a commissioner for over 10 years. Commissioner Bedecker, probably 5. I don't have your summary in front of me, but Mr. DeFamari has 10 years of experience as well. So I just want to assure the public that we are not here. I kind of take exception to sell your soul comment. We are here because we care about the wetlands, and we are here because we don't walk into these with a predetermination. We don't go into them opposed. We don't go into them in favor. We go in, ask questions, get evidence on the facts, and we apply their criteria with impartiality. So I just need to assure the public that we are volunteer citizens and we are doing this work. We attend 14 meetings regularly throughout the year. So this is not the first experience that we have with the application of this magnitude. So I would like to thank everybody for the interest, but I also wanted to assure you that we are listening. We are taking all of this information in. We're forming our questions. We are not coming into this, like I said, opposed or against. We are here, we're applying their criteria, and we're listening to the experts. We can even bring in our experts if we wanted to, but in this case, based on the criteria, based on the information, we've not chosen to do that. At this time, I'd like to open it up for additional questions that the commissioners may have. We've heard a lot of information, especially from Mr. Kenny. I'd like to open it up for comments and or questions from Mr. Bedecker, Mr. DeFamari, Ms. Valvo, Mr. Bave. Who wants to go first? Ms. Tryon, thank you. Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I've got 3 questions, but 2 of them are mostly clarification, if that's all right.
Sure.
The first one is for Mary Rose, actually. Did I understand correctly that the city engineer just recently got the newest of the plans and has said that he needs more time to review them? Did he say that in a letter, or was that a conversation? Did I understand that correctly?
Ms. Tryon, can you ask all 3 questions and then we'll be able to answer all, or are they dependent on, is the answer dependent?
No, but that question was for Mary Rose, and it's just for clarification.
Okay.
The next 2 questions, I think, are for Mr. Silva. And again, one of them is a clarification. There's been a lot of talk about the parking. So I just want to make sure the number of parking spaces is predicated on the size of the building, not on, hearing that there might be 300 employees or 500. The size of the building, the smaller the building, the fewer parking spaces. Am I correct in that?
And what's your 3rd question? Go ahead and get.
Yes, sorry. The 3rd question is a bit more complicated, but also for Mr. Silva. I asked a question at our last meeting about the lighting. Because wetlands are open 24/7. So I realize that they've got lighting that is really sitting right on the demarcation line between the property that we're discussing and Mondo Pond. So those lights, are they going to be on 24/7? Do we know what the lighting schedule is for those lights? Because there are a lot of nocturnal fauna living right there.
Okay, we'll get those questions. You can always ask more, but at this point, Mary Rose, if Mary Rose, you can answer the first question, then Mr. Silva, I'll give you the floor.
Right, through you, Mr. Chair. The city engineer has had the plans since we've got them in May and has had a back and forth with Rose Tizo. The latest plan, or his latest comments, came out last Friday afternoon, and he was reviewing information that had been updated due to a previous request after our last meeting. So it came in after the meeting on the 21st and got in, just before the holiday. So typically, there's a give and take with the city engineer that goes on for a bit. We don't necessarily see it all in writing, but he will review it when he returns.
And Mr. Silva, can you address the two other questions.
Mr. Chairman, it's Kevin Cursay. May I just address the parking? Because that's also more of a zoning regulation question. So typically, it's the size of the building and the use that will drive the parking requirement. There's parking tables. Each town, has them, and will call out for what's required for a warehouse, and that's why they require a floor plan to see what the various uses are within the building, because the warehouse might also have not this one doesn't, but for example, it could have a showroom, or it could have offices or things like that. So the uses are broken down. And then there's a new requirement for EV, electric charging vehicles, for projects over 30 parking spaces, for infrastructure for that. And then there's also other parking for required parking requirements. So that drives it, and then also the use will drive it in addition to that, meaning that if the user has less of a parking requirement or more of a parking requirement because it's 3 shifts, for example, so they don't need all of those parking spaces at once, or there's a shared use with a different user. So that's typically how the parking works. But in this particular situation, we're not in a position to reduce the size of the building. So we would have to ask because of the end user's requirements. And it's rare, not necessarily rare, but it's a unique situation where we do have their end user that has very specific requirements. So instead, we would have to ask as part of a zoning application that if we could get the parking reduced, as long as it fit the end user's requirements as well. We would do that through the zoning office, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Silver for the rest of it.
Thank you, Mr. Cursay. Mr. Silva?
Hi, this is Manny Silva from Rose Tizo again. As far as the lighting, we use dark sky compliant lighting fixtures. And like I said, the last meeting, we have a mounting height of 20 feet so that we ensure with the house side shielding. So we have shielding inside the actual fixture. And in SP5, we actually did the calculation so that we could show that we're not putting any light into the wetland areas or even the forested area for that matter. As far as the scheduling, I don't envision, I talked to the owner about this, and because of the use and that it could have people parked or working, being on site all night because of security, those lights would be on all night. But like I said, because the fixtures are low to the ground, they're not the very high fixtures that you see there today. They're about 20 feet off. They are 20 feet off the ground. And then we have the shielding, internal shielding inside the actual fixture. It's like a shoebox, and the light is inside that shoebox. When it's an LED, you won't see any kind of propagation of light besides the paved areas or the building that the lights were intended for. I mean, we're not lighting up. We're not going to be lighting up any areas in the woods or in the wetlands.
Thank you, Mr. Silva.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Ryan, did those comments answer both of your questions?
Yes, I guess I'm just still curious to see what those lights actually look like in real life, but that might not be possible. But I appreciate the answer.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, this is Kevin Cursay. Mr. Silva, didn't you show didn't you have a lighting plan that also had its specifications and details? I don't know if we can share that at this time, or whether that's something you can point out.
See if I can pull it up.
Yeah, I do believe that was part of the original public testimony.
Yes, it's like I said, it's SP5, and then we could I don't have a cut sheet of the actual fixture here. I can see if I can pull it up.
While you're doing that, Manny, why don't we come back to that and
Sure.
move on to the next topic?
No problem.
Ms. Valvo, would you like to ask a question or questions?
Yes, please. This is Julie Valvo. I actually have 2 separate unrelated questions. One is in regards to the number of parking spaces, and should there be a reduction in the number of spaces, could that then result in, I would imagine the spaces to be removed could potentially be, should they go with alternate plan 2? Would that result in that parking lot being made smaller, maybe non-existent, in which case could we potentially see a reduction in the number of trees and the amount of forest that is removed as a result of those parking spaces being reduced? My second question, I keep on hearing over and over in the testimony, and perhaps this is for Mr. Cinto, the reference to 12 trucks. Now I understand the concept of the loading dock and that it's just the trailers that will be there, not the trucks, but where does the 12 come from, right? I feel like that seems like a really arbitrary number, like there's only 12 a day. But with growth and, different regions and, obviously if the company is growing exponentially across the country, that's going to result in a greater demand on the amount of shipping and receiving that is taking place. And I'm just curious, in terms of forecasting and, that number 12, not 10, not 14, but 12 trucks a day, like where that number comes from and the realistic growth that might go along with, the company growing as well in terms of more trucks going in and out.
Thanks, Commissioner Valvo. Mr. Cinto, do you want to take the second question? And then Mayor Rose, I'd like for you to address the first question initially, please.
The 12 came from the tenant. The tenant told us that that's about what they have each day. So the most, in fact, the term he uses, the most they have is 12 a day. Most they have is 12 a day. So I don't think he would have told us that if that was a fact. That's where that came from. And I could understand it because he may have a truck or 2 trucks come in with merchandise that he brings into the facility. And then he's got all these trucks waiting to leave once they have enough stuff on to leave. So that's what he told us. So that's what we told you. I mean, that's where it came from.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Rose, do you want to address the first question?
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair. The first question is, should the number of parking spaces be removed? Would they then go with alternate 2? And could we see a reduction of the number of trees to be removed? Alternate 2 had the parking lot in the northern area with tight grading down to the wetland and pine trees proposed around the edge of the wetland. So if they needed less spaces, they would most likely choose to remove those because those are furthest from the building. But that would have to be something the applicant would tell us where they're proposing to remove spaces from when they go to the zoning board. I don't know exactly how many spaces the tenant needs.
Right. So I think the point, Ms. Valvo, is we as an agency can't base our decisions on an unknown factor. We have to base our decision on what's before us. And in the event that we do approve this application with whatever conditions, and they go before the zoning board and they get an exception and they have less parking, then the applicant will be obligated to come back to us with a modification to the permit. And we would then entertain the modification. We would either approve it or deny it, what have you. So, that's why I invited Mary Rose to kind of comment first, because by process, we have to bifurcate that. We just have to consider the application as it's presented today. And yeah, does that answer your question, Commissioner Valvo?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Additional questions from the agency. Mr. Bedeker, any questions? Mr. DeFlameri?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Dave DeFlameri. I didn't see this in the notes anywhere. I might have missed it. Is the building sprinklered? And if so, the calculations for rain runoff, is it included in it?
Any other questions, Mr. DeFumari?
No, that'll do.
Mr. Crusaden, do you want to answer that, or who from your team? wants-
Manny Silva from Rostizo. Yes, per building code, the building would have to be sprinklered. And then as for the calculations are based on a 100-year storm event, which is a 7-inch rainstorm over the whole site. So about just under, the whole site is about 10 acres. So the water that would be falling inside the building, most likely it goes to floor drains, which floor drains are then conveyed to the sanitary sewer line, not to the adjacent wetlands. But that volume of water would be able to be contained in our gallery system because if it was going there, but it's not. But if say the sprinkler system, the water starts leaking out of the loading docks and goes into our trench drain. Again, that then goes through our treatment train system and then it'd be stored in our gallery system. And we definitely have the capacity to hold that water because the likelihood that you'd have a fire event during a rainstorm is not likely. And then, like I said, majority of that water will be conveyed through the sewer system anyway, because floor drains inside of a building don't go to stormwater systems. They go to a sanitary sewer system. I also have the answer to the question. I mean, I have the specification on the actual site lighting. As you can see here, the blades are these flat blades that you see, I'm sure you've probably seen on some newer sites. And you can see the LED fixtures are inside the actual unit. It's not like a light or a bulb that hangs from them anymore. And then you can see here kind of a comparison of what a normal unshielded site light looks like. You see the spillage into the grass area back here and into the landscaping. And then when we have a house side shield like we do in this case, the area behind there, the off pavement, is completely black. So that's what we have on this project. Is we have these projected lights, and plus, I mean, we're gonna have poles that are about this height, around 20 feet, which will be around here. So that's even allows us to have more control over that light spillage. And then I just kind of, as someone was talking about the history of the project and, you know, the 500 spaces that were there, here's Subway right here currently and all the paved area. So right now, all the rain falls on this paved area, it goes into storm drains, and then it goes out to an outfall here. And then there's an outfall here that goes straight into the pond. I took the liberty of looking up, hold on, I just gotta move. Let me just move this for a second here. I'm sorry. Let me expand this a little bit. Here we go. Looking up the aerial photos from 1970. Here's 1971. You can see Mondo Pond was just created. Just keep an eye on this little curved road here. This is I-95 really built, and then these small little ponds here. In 1951, here's Mondo Pond. You don't see anything. It's a wooded area. Actually, it was a farm, and then the DOT started quarrying this area by creating these two little ponds here first, and then what they did is they created Mondo Pond. So actual construction activity is what created this large ecosystem and large wetland here. This was all man-made. If it wasn't for the I-95 construction needing gravel and material to bring these roadways up higher, Mondo Pond would still be just a wooded area or probably a developed subdivision or a condo like they have there at the Autobahn Circle. So that's just kind of like the history of the project. I just wanted to reiterate that, yes, we are going to be good stewards, use best management practices to improve this situation that it is here currently. Our building will be in the majority over this parking lot that's existing today. This building will be demolished, and then we'll give a further buffer to the Mondo Pond that is today. And then Mondo Pond itself was a quarry that was allowed to flood. And now is a benefit to the community and to the ecosystem of the area, for animals and stormwater and now is, under the stewardship of this commission. And that's all I have to say.
Mr. Bedeker, did you want to ask a question? Commissioner Bedeker.
No questions at this moment. I'm just absorbing all this and waiting for the next phase.
Okay, thank you. Julie, I see your hand is up. We are, did you have something you wanted to offer? We're in the segment that we're talking to the commissioners. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Commissioner, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add one thing about the company, the end user, just so people understood that they are heavy in regards to video as well. So I think there's a confusion in regards to this just being a distribution center. It's really not. What they actually do is they have European car users. Like if you own a BMW, you'll call that facility center and say, hey, I have this ding, ding, ding. And what does this mean? And they produce videos and they're YouTube videos. So along with the part that you might need, they also send you a video to fix it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting the part from FCP Euro, but you're getting the instructions to fix your car. They're so heavy in video that we are actually working with them in regards to tax credits for video, just like you would do a movie or all sorts of stuff. So it's not solely distribution. I just want to make sure everyone understands what that means, that there's a lot of video production that is actually in there. And I would say probably more than half of their business is video production, along with distribution, but there's distribution centers across the country. So I just wanted to make that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any additional questions from the commissioners? Mary Rose, do you want, at this time, do you want to give us some guidance on?
Yep, I have one additional question for Mr. Silva and just a clarification. He reviewed that he went over the 100-year storm with a 7-inch rainfall. Mr. Silva, is that using the latest Cornell numbers that are approved by the Army Corps and DOT for use, given the more impactful rainstorms we see recently?
Manny Silva again from Rose Tizo. So what we're using now is based on a bulletin from the Connecticut DEP, and they have instructed us to use the NOAA, or National Atmospheric, I forget what, Oceanic and Atmospheric Association numbers, which are updated constantly. So we use the NOAA numbers for Milford in this area, and that's how we determine the rainstorm events. And as you said, those numbers have gone up in the last couple of years.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Mary Rose. Do you want to summarize what our options are at this point?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, you have an application before you with two alternatives. You have the initial plan, alternative 1, and alternative 2. The agency has a full-fledged application with complete engineered drawings for the initial plan, which is the plan to fill the existing wetland and create that its current detention function through galleys in that same area, and to do improvements to create a parking area. I'm sorry, got lost for a second. To create improvements on the site. Option number 2, get there, is to, sorry, I lost my screen. The initial option is to fill the existing wetland, and create a wetland to the north of the existing driveway with no additional parking. The additional parking would be on the existing wetland. Alternative number 1 is to fill the existing wetland, creating a detention basin on site and doing off-site improvements on the adjacent Mondo Ponds property. Those plans have been shown by Mr. Kenny. We have the engineered plans for that as well as the initial plan. Option number 3 is to create is to leave the wetland the way it is with a smaller area filling, 1,800 square feet, to add some wetland to the existing detention basin area wetland, and to replant that to give it some more wetland functions and values than it currently has. It would perform its detention function as it does today, but it would add more to the ecosystem. They would also add a parking area to the north of the driveway, causing work to become within at the closest point 5 feet, at the furthest point I believe it's 30 feet of grading to the wetland area on the north side of the driveway with a slope, and that plan includes heavily treed with pine trees along the edge. We don't have the full engineering for that alternative, for alternative 2. So the agency can have a discussion to decide if they need any more information from the applicant. If you feel that one of the alternatives that we don't have a full set of plans for is the way you want to go, agency can't make a decision with plans pending after your approval. So you would need to leave the hearing open specifically for that set of plans so you can review it, make sure you're comfortable with it, and then make the decision at that time. So at this time, the agency should have a discussion as to which alternative they're more comfortable with, see if they have any more questions for the applicant, and if they need any more information from the applicant.
Thank you, Mary Rose. Open it up for discussion on the basis of Mary Rose's guidance. Mr. Bedeker.
Commissioner Bedeker, Milford. To the folks who live at Audubon Close, I've very aware of Mondo Ponds and the trail around there. I've hiked and run around there several times, so it's a very nice area, and of course they want to protect it. But the site is not going to lay fallow. Something's going to be there, and this seems like a good company with a good plan. I'm against removing any large swath of trees. So at this point, I don't know which plan it was, but the improvement of the Mondo Ponds area is where I'm leaning right now.
Ms. Tryon?
I would tend to favor alternate 2 because we're saving the existing wetlands. We are not going to try to turn a forest into a wetlands at some later date. And we're actually saving the land that the project is on. I would favor that. I would also favor getting fully engineered plans for that before we go further.
Thank you, Ms. Tryon. I'm going to speak. I've been asking a lot of questions and I've been silent on my views. I echo your sentiments, Commissioner Tryon. I think the testimony from Mr. Kenny was very compelling. The criteria that we apply and his testimony as it relates to alternative 2 resonates, and it protects the wetlands, it enhances the wetlands. It actually, in my view, is very well designed in terms of having all the trees buffer that proposed parking area in the north and the east, that whole perimeter. Not only does it provide, in my view, a sound design from a wetlands perspective, but it also would act as a nice buffer from a sound perspective to the adjoining properties as well, which in effect is kind of consistent with the trees that are there now. So I think that that feature mitigates a major concern I have with destroying those trees. That is a concern, but in my view, from what I've heard on the testimony, I believe that it's a net benefit. And again, I think the functions and values, which is really what we're governed by, that is the gold. That is the gold standard that we use. Not the number of trucks that come and go. Sorry, but that's not the criteria. It's the functions and values of the wetlands in the application. So for those reasons, I'm in favor of having a full-fledged plan. And Mary Rose, can you just kind of indulge us on what you mean by a full-fledged plan, on what you feel is, what additional information you feel is necessary to sort of qualify it as such? And then I'll go to Commissioner DeFomeri and Commissioner Bave for your views as well.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the main plan that you have received has the stormwater, the grading, all fleshed out for the initial plan. For alternative 2, there is the rough drawing, which I should be able to show in half a second, which I don't believe has the full. There we go. Just needed it. Has the full engineering shown on the plan. Just trying to share it. Hold on.
While you're doing that, I also couldn't discern, there was evidently an update to one of the documents posted on June 30th, but I couldn't discern what the update was. It was a 101-page document. So I guess I can defer that question to Mr. Silva, but I couldn't discern what in that document was revised. But go ahead, Mary Rose, and I'll come back to Mr. Silva.
Okay, to answer that, the immediate question through you, the 101-page document was the stormwater plan, and that's Mr. Silva addressed. City engineer wanted the contributing areas, all the contributing areas to be shown, not just the impervious areas. So they updated those numbers. And that was the update to that plan. Before you on the screen is alternative wetland plan that we received on June 30th. It was done by William Kenny Associates, and it shows the existing wetland replanted with additional wetland area on the northern edge, and the proposed 1,800 square feet to be lost on this side. I'm sorry, on the east. The proposed parking area, and it has, you know, the grading overlain by the trees, and we've got the cross section of what those things will look like. We don't have the sedimentation and erosion control plan finished. We don't have any stormwater design for this. You know, one can imagine there'll be catch basins that run into the detention system, but we don't have that.
Great, thanks for clarifying that, Mary Rose. Circling the wagons to Commissioner Bahave, do you have a point of view on which option you would like to focus on?
I think I'm in favor of option 2, which will save the trees and it will also preserve the wetlands. So I'm in favor of option 2.
And let's see, Ms. Valvo, do you want to comment on which option you wanted to focus on?
Yes, please. I am in favor, like Mr. Bediger, of enhancing the trails and infrastructure around the town property, maintaining the forest as it stands with all the trees up front. I think that it's to enhance the wetlands that's there and make it a more friendly environment for folks to use it. I think would enhance the property as a whole, while still maintaining the integrity of the wetlands.
Okay. So at this time, I believe, Mary Rose, you had suggested that we consider keeping the public hearing open on the limited basis of keeping or seeking additional documentation and plans from the applicant in relation to at least alternative 2, which is one of the options that we're considering.
Right, if the agency is considering option 2, you can't approve it until you have a finalized plan. So you would need the engineered plans for what that stormwater is going to be, so we can see if there's any outfalls or any things we need to consider in that area on that slope adjacent to the wetland. For the first alternative, the work on Mondo Ponds, we have Mr. Kenny's drawing that was submitted initially with alternatives showing the work on that property. I don't know if that appears sufficient because it's minor trail enhancement work. Let me share that now. And you can tell me if you would like to see additional information on that so you can debate that at your meeting. As a refresher, the top is you can see on the bottom center, the portion of the subway corporate building and the trail going around the northern edge of Mondo Ponds. And the improvements that were proposed were to replace a footbridge so we stop having degradation of the trail as people use foot traffic over the wetland. Item B was to install some stabilization and a boardwalk for a similar reason. Item C is an elevated trail over an area that tends to get wet seasonally to prevent some erosion and going into either pond on either side. And that would be in this area. And item D were in these 2 spots, which we can't see right now, is to control invasive vegetation. And I apologize, that's in 3 spots. There's a large invasive area here and 2 spots here. This would require, I believe Mr. Kenny testified, this would require like a 5-year monitoring, a stand of knotweed here that would be removed with and treated and removed and native vegetation replacing it.
So to those commissioners who are interested in this option as your preferred option, do you have additional information you need from the applicants in order to move into the deliberation stage?
So Chairman, as far as option 2, I would like it fully expanded with all of the changes they proposed and the drainage, et cetera, et cetera.
Agreed. Agreed. I don't think that's in question. I think the question is whether or not option 1, the alternative 1, which is an option that a couple of members have spoken in favor of. The question to the agency is there additional information you need from the applicants? Because Commissioner Valvo.
One question that I do have, when we went on the site walk, there was discussion about improving the drainage from not the main Mondo ponds, but the smaller pond off to it that has remained kind of stagnant over the years and doesn't have good drainage. And I'm feeling like perhaps that aspect of the project may have been eliminated as they went through and did their final presentation on it. I'd be curious to understand for certain if that intention to improve the drainage there was still a part of the plan.
Mr. Crusaden, can you address that?
Yeah, I will start to. I know exactly what Commissioner Valvo is talking about in the area that we're speaking of. There was some conversations amongst the project team afterwards that we were talking about. It was a rather large drainage pipe, and we were talking about either repairing it or unclogging it. I think there was some concerns that would have an unintended consequence of potentially lowering the water level of the main or, Mondo ponds, because it's been backed up like that for a period of time. But there was another suggestion that came up with respect to that maybe not replace that pipe or empty that pipe, clean that pipe out. But there was some other conversations about that, and I'd have to defer to maybe either Mr. Rose or Mr. Silva, Mr. Kenny on that.
I'd be pleased to provide some additional information with regard to that. And what Attorney Kersaden mentioned is accurate, that that pipe appears to be quite old and clogged for many, many years, probably decade or more. And so now it has allowed the water level in the upper pond or the western pond to be higher than it was before that pipe was clogged many years ago. And the ecosystem surrounding in the pond and surrounding the pond, all the wetlands around the pond have adjusted to those conditions of the water level being higher. So if we cleaned out that pipe in its current location, it would drop the water level a good foot or more in the pond. And so we were concerned it would dry up wetlands around the perimeter of the pond. So we thought that let it continue as it is. There is an option of possibly creating a surface channel somewhere across the road that separates the two ponds. That would be more of a release valve during certain times of the year to allow water to flow between the ponds in a controlled way that prevents erosion. So maybe you replace that subsurface pipe with a stabilized surface channel, and it wouldn't flow all the time, just under high events, and it would provide a controlled flow condition to help control erosion. And
Thank you.
Mr. Cinto, I think Mr. Cinto has a comment.
Yeah,
Mr. Cento, go ahead.
we'd be happy to put in a new pipe so that in case you do have that condition, it will go into the pond. It won't overflow or wipe out that drainage, that pathway that you have. I think the reason they said the reason they didn't want to do it is they were afraid of lowering the water table on that side and taking away some wetlands. But I'd be happy to install a pipe as an overflow pipe so that when you do have a lot of rain, you get out of that and it doesn't wash out the walking path that you have. That like an outlet control. Yes. Okay.
Thank you. I'm just gonna do a time check. It's 5 of 10. I do have a commissioner who has had to drop. Mary Rose, given that Mr. Bohave has had to leave the meeting, we no longer have a quorum.
No, I believe we still have a quorum, sir. Hold on.
We do, yes. One.
We do.
Three.
We still have a quorum, barely.
Okay, thank you. Normally we do have a full house this evening. We have a couple of members who couldn't make it. I'm gonna kind of, in the interest of serving as chair, I'm gonna sort of lead us down to the next stage of our process, which is
Excuse me.
continue. I'm sorry, Lisa, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just need clarification of Daniel and Julie. Are they in favor of the original plan or alternate one? That was confusing to me.
Alternate one is what I heard them say. Is that correct, Commissioner Valvo, Commissioner Bedeker?
That is correct.
Okay,
That
thank
is
you.
that is where you're leaning. Is that right?
Correct.
If that's the Mondo Ponds improvement, that's the alternate plan I'm in favor of.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. One additional consideration I would like to invite the commissioners to consider is Mr. Kenny's last summary on the functions and values. Pursuant to our many years of training, I just want to emphasize that the functions and values is really important. And Mr. Kenny, if you could show that for the sake of making a point, I would like to draw attention to the net benefits associated with alternative 2 versus alternative 1. And I would just persuade the commissioners to consider that. Yeah, we'll have time to consider it because I believe as long as we don't need additional information from the applicant on alternative 1, which it sounds like we don't, it sounds like we have all the information needed. I will just say that as I've listened to the testimony and as I've listened to the concerns, and I've listened to the options, alternative 2 resonates because of the net benefits. The functions and values, as you can see from this expert testimony, is a net improvement in most categories, with the exception of no change in the first category. So to me, that's fundamental to how we consider evaluating this. And there's nothing on the record from the experts that would suggest that we should be inclined to deny this application. There's nothing factual that would suggest that. I would actually say that the initial plan is unimpressive. It doesn't meet our standards of criteria when it comes to the amount of wetlands disturbed and irretrievably lost. So to me, the initial plan is out of contention altogether. And I see that alternative plan 2 is a net improvement versus the existing conditions. And I just wanted to take a moment to draw that out based on my years of experience and based on my years of going to annual summits with other commissioners in the state of Connecticut. So with that in mind, I'm just going to circle the wagons, go back to Mr. Bedeker and Ms. Valvo. Is there anything associated with alternative plan 1 that you might need to consider that plan that we need from the applicant? If not, we can make that clear. If so, we just need to make that clear too.
My only concern was that my understanding from that original, in regards to the pipe and, what I had envisioned was that upper pond would get kind of cleaned out more and be like a more desirable wetland and not quite so murky and overgrown. And I will say that if that has been eliminated from the plan, and I think that it has been eliminated because, if we were to say, okay, let's explore this, and they've got concerns over unplanned consequences, I wouldn't feel comfortable moving forward and saying I feel strongly about alternative 1, not knowing, the real impact of doing that drainage. I would hate to see something that I envisioned to be a positive to turn into a negative. I'm not an engineer. So I think that for that reason, I might be inclined to move towards alternate 2.
Thank you for your consideration. And again, for me, the fact that we're enhancing wetlands and creating additional wetlands with minimal loss is really the sort of fundamental. The additional considerations outside the area are sort of secondary in relation to that as I think about it. I'm sure others have views, and we could talk about it and deliberate it more in the next session, but as long as we're clear about what information we need from the applicants so that we can move into the deliberation stage. So that comes back to Mary Rose. Do we need to continue the public hearing or keep it open for any reason, or do you feel like we have all the information? It sounds like we don't have all the information. It sounds like we need that fully fledged plan for alternative 2. So we should keep it open for that reason, minimally.
Through Mr. Chair, the agency should, if alternate 2 is what you're considering, you would want the engineering for that plan so that you can compare that to the initial plan. And you have all the information I think that you need for the alternate 1.
I think so.
So that's still there for consideration. So if you're going to leave the hearing open, you should leave it open for specific items. That way members of the public could comment on those specific items. We would not revisit the other items. We would just comment on the new things that would be brought before us. But you need to be specific and ask your questions now of anything else that you have of the consultants on any other items that you're not gonna consider at the next meeting. So you want to find out, about the additional parking, the drainage, and if there's anything else for alternate 1 that you want to see.
So with the assistance of my fellow commissioners, what additional information do we need? And let's make a motion. Let's make it in the form of a motion to, as Mary Rose just gave us guidance, to continue the hearing on a very limited basis for receiving additional information relative to the alternative 2. Do we have a motion? Can someone formulate that as a motion?
You're looking for the engineering for the parking as shown in alternative 2.
And the stormwater treatment.
And the stormwater treatment.
Mr. Bedeker.
I make that motion.
Okay, so Mary Rose, do you want to recap the motion for the sake of making it?
Sure. Is the agency interested in a cross section of that slope? I think there was one in Mr. Kenny's report to show the grade changes and how that'll be protected with the erosion control. So you're looking for the engineering for the parking and stormwater treatment, including sedimentation and erosion controls, and cross section showing the grade. I believe we already have the planting plan from Mr. Kenny.
We do. Mr. Bedeker, go ahead.
Oh, and you might add how many of the established trees in that area would have to be taken out.
And I would add, and then in contrast, the volume of trees that are being proposed. That's probably on the plan, but we've just received it this evening, but I would like to have both of those pieces of information pulled together. Ms. Tryon, do you have any other thoughts around what information we might need that we haven't seen?
Without harping on it, if we're going to go with alternate 2, I don't believe we've seen a lighting plan for that as well. And I would really like to see a lighting plan.
That's great. Thank you. You read my mind. Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second on the motion?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. DiFumeri. Mary Rose, do you want to read the motion just for the clarity of the record?
Sure. The motion would read, Mr. Chairman, I move that the public hearing for IW 23-0030 subway, IW 23-0029-305 subway, IW 23-0028 325 subway be continued to 7/19/21 at 7:30 p.m. for the following information. The engineering for the parking and stormwater treatment including soil and erosion control, cross-section and lighting plan for alternate 2, and how many established trees in that area would need to be removed.
Did you say stormwater? I might have missed it if you said it.
Yes, engineering for parking and stormwater treatment in sedimentation erosion control. And cross-section lighting plan.
Thank you. I was thinking. So the motion's been made by Mr. Bedecker. It's been seconded by Mr. DiFlamere. Any discussion on the motion? There's a point I was thinking about. Give me a second. Yes, discussion point. We've made a motion for the hearing to be continued on a limited basis at the next regularly scheduled meeting. That's July 19th. Mayor Rose, can you just comment on the statutory requirement as it relates to when we would need to complete our due diligence and render either an approval or a denial on the application?
Yes, this hearing can be held open as far as the following week, which would be the 26th of July. If we were to close the hearing on the 19th of July, we would then have 35 days upon which to make a decision. And that would bring us to the 23rd of August. We would need to make a decision by that time. We have two meetings. We have the August 2nd meeting, the August 16th meeting. And as always, the agency could make the meeting, make the decision the night of the hearings closed, which is July 19th.
Thank you for just confirming that. So we are within the statutory requirements. Any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Lisa, roll call vote, please.
Did you say Ranjit left?
Yes, he has.
Yes, he had to leave.
So Daniel Bedecker,
Aye.
Dave DiFlamere,
Aye.
Lisa Tryon,
Aye.
Julie Valvo,
Aye.
Brendan Magnan.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. So at this time, we can now move on to the regular business of the agency. There's no additional discussion to be had on the matter before us. Thank you everyone for your interest. If you are staying, you're welcome to, but if you're departing, thank you for your participation in the process, and we'll see you on the 19th of July. Moving on to item D, public comments. I'm going to assume there's no other comments, although I'll open it up if there's any comments from the public on topics not otherwise on the agenda. Seeing none, moving on. The consideration of the minutes, I'm going to defer that until next meeting. The draft minutes were published on the website. There will be an email sent out to everyone to ask you to review those, and we'll vote on accepting those minutes at the next meeting. At this time, I'd like to invite Mayor Rose to give us a staff report.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for hanging in there. No real changes. Got a couple of projects that have submitted their as-built, and we're working through those as they come in. And we've gotten a couple of reports. The swearing reports have come in, and I'll report on those as we move through this public hearing process. Does anyone have any questions for Taft or I? Does anyone need any other information for this hearing? You need hard copies of plans, anything, please do let us know. So Taft and I can get that to you.
Mayor Rose, just a question, thinking about the annual summit in November. I haven't seen an invite for that yet, even like a hold your date. It's something I just wanted to, if we could maybe by the next meeting confirm that's going to be. It's typically the first or second Saturday in November.
They moved it around quite a bit. I think last year they actually held it in October. One year it was in December. So I will reach out.
Especially Commissioner Valvo, as a new member, it's something that I've found invaluable, going to those summits where you listen to seminars on case law and other, sort of applicants. Mr. DiFlamere has been there a couple times. Mr. Bedecker has been. Ms. Tryon, you've been, haven't you? you echo my sentiments that it's worth a Saturday. It's tough making time, but they're really valuable and it's not expensive.
No, the cost is covered by the city to get the commissioners trained.
Just to move on to the chair's report, thanks everybody for the excellent participation in this evening's meeting. Commissioner Bave, if you're listening, thank you for joining as long as you could. Please endeavor to make the 19th. This is really important that we continue to have good deliberation and that we have continuity in our process. If we don't have a quorum, then we're going to have a problem. So we really appreciate that. And I, just for the record, will not be available on August 2nd. I will be out of the country on vacation. So I will be on an airplane at that very night. So in the event the matter doesn't get voted on before then, I will not be able to participate if it's that night, let's say. Let's see.
Adjourn.
I think we can adjourn. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
You have a motion.
Do we have a motion?
Make the motion.
Motion.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Oh, Lisa, roll call vote.
I'm sorry, who
Sorry to say
seconded?
that way, Lisa. I don't mean it that way.
Who seconded that? Dave?
Yes.
Okay. Daniel Bedecker,
Aye.
Dave DiFlameri,
Aye.
Lisa Tryon,
Aye.
Julie Valvo,
Aye.
Brenda Magnan.
Aye, motion carries. Meeting is adjourned. Sorry for my dog being part of the video, but when there was a firework, he gets very anxious and he needed to be on me. So sorry, but he gets that way. Thanks, everybody.
Good
Thank
night.
you, everyone.
Good night.
Night, everybody.
Have a good week. Thanks for hanging in.
Aye.
Lindsay, we're all done.